Activate instant kill!
To say that Infinity War and Endgame changed the Marvel Cinematic Universe would be something of an understatement. Fans recently witnessed an awesome battle that was the result of years of storytelling that resulted in the Avengers being a very different lineup by the end of the saga.
Assemble.
Couple that with the Fox merger and the advent of Disney Plus, and things are really starting to shake up. With that in mind, how will the Avengers look by Phase 5? And how many teams will there be? The Avengers team as we know it in the MCU is forever changed thanks to the events of Endgame. Tony Stark valiantly sacrificed himself in order to save the universe,
Iron Man.
while Steve Rogers bowed out of a life of soldiering and fighting to grow old with Peggy Carter. Black Widow, almost unceremoniously, met her end, but will return for her own solo film which takes place after Civil War. On top of that, Thor has stepped away from both New Asgard and Earth, opting to join the Guardians of the Galaxy on an adventure of a sort.
Of course. Of course.
This last bit is now even more confusing as Thor Love and Thunder is set to hit the big screen before Guardians 3, making us wonder if that tease was in vain. As of this moment, the Hulk and Hawkeye are the only two original members left on the roster. The point of the matter though is that many Avengers are gone, meaning that who is left and willing to carry the fight onwards is up for debate. But if a recent internet theory has anything to say about it, there may very well be 4 different Avengers teams by the time we meet up with them again in Phase 5. We say Phase 5 because at this particular moment in time, Marvel and Kevin Feige have yet to actually announce that the 5th Avengers movie will even happen in the upcoming Phase 4. We know that Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness will be a Phase 4 movie, along with the Eternals, Shang-Chi, and the previously mentioned Thor film and a slew of Disney Plus original series. Black Panther 2, Blade, and the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 are also on the horizon, we just don't know when that'll be or what phase they'll hit the big screen. The point of the matter though is that Phase 4 so far looks to be fairly self-contained. But once that's out of the way, you bet Feige and his team will find a way for the Avengers to join forces yet again. What makes the future so interesting though is how Endgame left things and what the Fox merger promises for the future. So first, let's ask the question, do the Avengers even exist after the events of Endgame? And if so, who leads them? It's been suggested that Kit Harington's character from the Eternals, Black Knight, could step into the leadership position of the core Avengers team at some point.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Black Knight wields the Ebony Blade, which has the power to cut through just about anything, and more interestingly, cut through mystical barriers. The blade is also cursed, so Kit's gonna want to meet up with Doctor Strange at some point to fix that. So if Black Knight becomes the new leader, our Avengers are gonna operate quite differently than how they did in the first 3 phases. Perhaps being more mystical and cosmic than confined to crime on Earth. If that's true, and the Avengers will be different in operation and lineup, could this be the new Avengers? In the comics, there are more than one different flavor of Avengers. You have names like the New Avengers, Secret Avengers, West Coast Avengers, and so on. Endgame sorta leaves that one up in the air, and the Disney Plus shows surely don't help make things any clearer. Kevin Feige recently spoke about the future of the core Avengers team lineup and stated that of course he knows who will be on the team, but that said team will look very different than what fans are used to at this point in the MCU. But that was the whole point with Endgame, to stir the pot a bit as it were. He also mentioned that the next lineup will feature characters that we're familiar with, while also revealing that characters that have yet to be revealed will also assemble. But of course, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it was only one team we had to worry about in the future. One of the most interesting and unassuming Easter eggs in Endgame was the inclusion of Harley Keener from Iron Man 3 at Tony's funeral.
What's your name?
Harley.
In the comics, Keener goes on to become Iron Lad, who creates and fronts the Young Avengers team, a group of superheroes who are a bit on the younger side. Coming from Marvel in Phase 4 are the teenaged Kate Bishop from the Hawkeye TV series and Miss Marvel. Perhaps they'll join Iron Lad one day and have their own team. Moving onwards, we have to look towards villains and evil for this possible team. Unlike the Young Avengers lineup, which is at least based on characters that are in or coming to the MCU, the Dark Avengers currently has no in-universe connection or reason to exist. The Dark Avengers, in case you're wondering, was a group of supervillains led by Norman Osborn, who has become the head of the new S.H.I.E.L.D. after the Skrull invasion. The new S.H.I.E.L.D., called Hammer, sees Osborn decide to recruit some like-minded villains to actually posse up and become the new Avengers to protect the Earth. In a move that was pretty bold, the villains all decided to take on the costumes and appearances of beloved heroes, with Norman Osborn replacing Iron Man as the Iron Patriot as opposed to his usual Green Goblin getup. It's a risky move centering an MCU movie around the bad guys, and we know bad guy super teams don't always work out. Suicide Squad!
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
But this idea is actually based on a proposed script that is lingering around the vaults over at Marvel. But just because that script may actually exist, it doesn't mean that Marvel may be going ahead with it. They may simply be testing the waters. But still, seeing as how the Skrulls are now in the MCU and the Secret Invasion could play out, who's to say Dark Avengers won't come in at some point in the future? The questions that follow, of course, would be who would be on this particular roster and who will play Norman Osborn in the MCU? Thanks in part to Tom Holland, Spider-Man is safe at home with Marvel and the MCU, so if he crosses paths with Norman in the third Spider-Man film, perhaps Norman could be introduced and carried over in a future title.
Think about it, hero!
Not only that, but the upcoming Marvel titles all have characters that would be perfect fits for the Dark Avengers lineup. At least so thinks Redditor The Incredible Shaq. In the Black Widow movie, we'll get introduced to David Harbour's Alexei Shostakov, otherwise known as Red Guardian, and Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova, the latter of which would be the ideal candidate to become the Dark Black Widow. Harbour, in turn, as Red Guardian, could become a Dark Captain America. The Black Widow movie is also going to include Taskmaster, who can become the new Hawkeye. In the comics, it's Bullseye, but having Taskmaster have a connection to the Black Widow makes sense with the connection to Hawkeye. The Hulk is, of course, a member of the Avengers, but there isn't a character on the horizon who could replace him in the villain category thus far that's been announced. We here at Screen Rant would love to see William Hurt reprise his role as General Thunderbolt Ross and take up the mantle of Red Hulk, but something tells us that's not likely. An idea that was suggested states that Marvel could bring back Abomination, or a variation of Abomination who could be written to come off as a victim to the destruction of Harlem. With the villain-turned-hero angle in play, this is how Abomination could end up on the roster.
Is that all you've got?
With Thor, there could be a candidate to fit his position in the upcoming Eternals movie, or even a different version of Thor from another reality thanks to the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness movie. Personally, we like this wacky idea, and hope that the MCU begins to do more zany, comic booky stuff on the big screen in the future as opposed to playing it safer. Be bold, Marvel, be bold! We mentioned West Coast Avengers earlier on in this video, and that was intentional, as Marvel seems to be pushing forward towards such a team-up, only on the smaller screen as it turns out. In the comics, the Avengers were based out of New York, and couldn't always reach the West Coast in time if an attack happened. So, Vision decided to create a new branch of the Avengers called the West Coast Avengers to tackle events on that side of the country. Members of the West Coast team include Moon Knight, Scarlet Witch, Vision, Hawkeye, and US Agent, a character who will appear on the show The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Interestingly, all these characters are slated to appear on Disney Plus in the future. So those 3 new teams in addition to the mainstay team will result in 4 possible Avengers team-ups by the 5th phase. If Marvel does go down this road, they have to be careful not to give the audience Avengers fatigue. The whole point of Avengers is that it's a big event, one that brings multiple franchises together and thus unites many fandoms. If there are 4 Avengers-level events happening at the same time, it can maybe get a little tiring. But, that being said, perhaps such an event lurks on the horizon that will see 4 different types of Avengers team uniting in a shaky alliance perhaps against an even greater threat to the planet, or the galaxy, or the universe. And that's not even mentioning the Fox merger. When Disney and Fox joined together, all of the Marvel characters who are at home at Fox are now moving over to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As we all know by now, this means that the X-Men and Fantastic Four, staples of the original rosters and some of the oldest comic book Avengers ever, will also be available to join an MCU team. Will we see something like the comic book crossover event Avengers vs. X-Men? How will their inclusion shape the Avengers going forward? Could we, one day, even see the Illuminati group come into play on the big screen? That group, separate from the Avengers, included the likes of Professor X, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Namor, and others to form a superhero government, as each member of the team each knows unique information that collectively can be used for good. Of course, it's all very cloak and dagger since they operate behind the scenes. So while not an Avengers team, it is still something we may see come to pass one day, along with events like Secret Invasion. All things to consider now as the MCU goes forward. But what do you think? Could Marvel one day offer up 4 different Avengers teams to us? Which of the 3 new teams do you think could be the most likely, and which is the least likely? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.